E3 2013. It's the year mostly remembered for Sony absolutely destroying Microsoft with the announcement of the PlayStation 4, due to it being way cheaper and also not having any weird always online DRM attached to it. I, like many others, decided that for that generation the PS4 would be my console of choice. But if there was one game that almost convinced me to get an Xbox, it would be Dead Rising 3. But 12 years later, it's a game that rarely gets mentioned when talking about the series. So, how was it? So yeah, today I'm looking at Dead Rising 3, the game that everyone forgets about in this series, and it's a bit of a shame really because it's actually a really good game, and that's what I'm looking at today. As I was editing this video, I realised that I didn't really talk about the DLC a lot, so if you want to see a video where I talk about Dead Rising 3 and 4's DLC and all the other add-ons for this series, let me know in the comments down below. I'll do that in a separate video, but yeah, I didn't bring it up in this video and I kind of regret that now, but I don't want to delay this video even longer, so yeah, I'll just be talking about the base game today. But I'm going to keep this intro short. Let's get straight into Dead Rising 3. The gap between Off the Record and Dead Rising 3 felt massive, but in reality it was only 2 years. That was mainly down to the fact that Dead Rising 3 released on the new generation of consoles, and the leaps in terms of graphics was insane. It felt like the time between both felt like a 5-year gap. The game was developed by Blue Castle Games, now known as Capcom Vancouver, and from the early gameplay it seemed like they were taking the series in a new, more realistic direction. The game was, and technically still is, an Xbox exclusive, only ever getting ported to the PC with no release on a PlayStation console, and it remains the only mainline entry not to be released on a PlayStation. It was released alongside the Xbox One on its launch day back on November 22nd, 2013. Dead Rising 3 also takes place in the exact same timeline as the previous two games, but now it takes place a few years in the future, in 2021, 11 years after Dead Rising 2, and I'm going to be honest, it's a bit eerie playing this now, because the game's set in 2021, and one of the first cutscenes is about people arguing over getting some sort of vaccine to stop the outbreaks happening. This game was released all the way back in 2013, so yeah, it's just a bit of a weird coincidence. Anyway, this game follows Nick Ramos, a mechanic who has survived an outbreak in the city of Los Perdidos, which is this game's version of LA. Nick is probably the most realistic protagonist in the series, as Frank and Chuck kind of get used to the idea of running around killing zombies in the first 30 seconds, whereas Nick spends the whole game doing this.
Oh man! Oh no! Whoa! Whoa!
Now the city has been quarantined, him and a few other survivors have to work together to escape the city. No, not that city. It's a pretty standard zombie survival story, but what makes Dead Rising 3 interesting is the way it's tied into the previous games in the series. There's tons of references to events from those games and old characters showing up throughout the story. The game, like all of its predecessors, has a few different endings depending on your actions throughout the game, with some twists and turns along the way. Obviously there's a few spoilers which I'm not going to talk about, but let's just say there's characters here who have shown up in other Dead Rising games and we didn't even realise it was them. Overall, Dead Rising 3's story feels a lot more dark and gritty as well. That could be down to the art style and look of the game, but there's still a lot of that Dead Rising quirkiness we've grown to love. I was going into this game expecting it to feel completely different to the previous games in the series, but it feels really similar to Dead Rising 2, which isn't a bad thing. Playing this straight after that game, it was easy to get a hang of it straight away. There's obviously a few improvements made. For example, when eating food you can still move around, and also picking up items seems a lot smoother. You don't just get stuck in an animation. You can now sprint, and also you now have access to a weapon wheel to bring up your weapons quicker. But you can also just use the traditional way of swapping weapons. You also have different commands you can now give to survivors who are following you, rather than just shouting at them like a nutcase. And also a new heavy attack has been added once you get your combo meter up, even though it plays a lot like Dead Rising 2, which again isn't a bad thing, and the melee attacks are fine. The shooting in this game still feels a bit sluggish. Now maybe that's just my sensitivity, but it doesn't feel as smooth as you expect a game released in 2013 to feel. Obviously I need to talk about the visuals, and man, this game has aged surprisingly well. I was half expecting to go back to this game and it to look nothing like I remember, but it looks just as good as it did back then. I am running it on its highest settings on the Steam Deck, and there are a few stutters in the frame rate and a few pop-ins, but nothing too major, especially considering how many zombies are on screen at one time. The only major problem I had was with the cutscenes being really broken, but then again that might just be my settings on the Steam Deck causing that. I'm sure the Xbox version runs perfectly fine. Overall the gameplay hasn't drastically changed from the previous games. But then again, it didn't have to. It made just enough improvements to make the game feel fresh, and also visually it's still one of the most impressive looking games in the series, and definitely still holds up almost 12 years later. A few things have changed in terms of the way you fight and traverse the world of Dead Rising 3. Let's start with the weapons. The first thing to note is that the combo weapons return, but this time round can now be crafted anywhere you want, and not just at certain points in the map. This works a lot better seeing as you don't have to carry 2 useless weapons in your inventory to take to a crafting bench, and can just make them on the go instead. The way combos work has been changed slightly as well. You now need to unlock the blueprints to be able to make them, but also weapons have been broken up into their own categories, meaning for most combos you don't need to find specific items, just items that fit the same category, which makes crafting them a lot easier. There's also weapon lockers in the safe houses as well, where you can pick up a wide range of ready built combo weapons and other rare items. I don't know if this is full of OP weapons because I have the special edition, or if this comes as standard, but it seems a bit broken to just have all these weapons at your disposal straight away. I only use them once during my playthrough, and it's fun to go play around with some of them straight away, but they make playing through the objectives way too easy, so I try to stay away from them as much as possible. All in all, weapons haven't changed all too much. It's hard to keep track of what's been taken out and what's been added in, due to there being hundreds of things you can pick up, but due to everything now being separated into categories, it makes even the most useless things in the game something useful. Vehicles have now become a massive part of the gameplay experience, as now you have to traverse a city where every street is filled with hundreds of zombies. Trying to walk through them sometimes is just not an option. In the past games, vehicles were quite sparse, but now you don't have to look too far to find one. They're not OP either, as the zombies will swarm and jump on the car you drive. And also, trying to drive through a massive horde will slow you right down and cause damage to your car. I do like how they've used vehicles in this game. There's a decent amount of choice. You can jump in a standard sedan or a muscle car, or get a supercar from a showroom, but also motorbikes and vehicles you'd find on a construction site have been added as well. There's tons of ramps to go off to get past massive hordes, but also some roads are blocked off, meaning you can't just drive from objective to objective in a few minutes. The last thing to talk about when it comes to vehicles is the fact that just like the weapons, they can be put together in the form of combo vehicles. There's a few options, each one coming with its own form of weapons, whether that be a machine gun or a flamethrower. There's some crazy options in here, like a steamroller combined with a motorcycle to create this. It definitely gives a lot more use to the vehicles in the game, and adds a lot more options when it comes to traversing the city of Los Perdidos. The last thing I need to touch on is upgrades. Just like previous games, you level up throughout the game by doing certain objectives, taking out psychos or saving survivors, but this time round you now get to choose what you upgrade. It's mostly the same things you level up in previous games, like health, inventory space, stamina, with a few new things added as well, like mechanic to help build combos quicker, and speaking of combos, you can also use points to unlock certain combo categories. This means those weapon categories I spoke about earlier can now be used on any combo weapon that need that type of part, rather than specific items. It does feel like a growing scene, as you don't get a lot of points to spend each time you level up, and there's a lot to upgrade, but just like the previous game, your level stays with you after every new playthrough, so it's not too bad. Dead Rising 3 offers the best version of weapons and vehicles seen in the series so far, with the crazy amount of combos to make, not only to weapons but to vehicles as well. It does feel like the series was moving a bit away from the more wacky and light-hearted side we'd seen previously, but still offers a tons of fun in terms of weapons and vehicles. I'm going to start this section off by talking about the survivors, as this game sees the first big major change when it comes to how you save them. No longer do you rescue them from a store and take them back to the safe house, instead they are split into 2 different types. One of the groups is pretty straightforward. They'll be stranded somewhere around the map and you'll just have to clear the zombies around them. After doing that, they'll just sort of sprint off into the distance, never to be seen again. The other group get given to you as objectives, similar to past games. Most of the survivors will give you objectives, which is mostly just collecting things for them. After completing some of them, they will just decide to follow you, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to get rid of them. Maybe I missed something, but I just spend most of my time actively trying to run away from them, and after a bit they just seem to disappear.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
I do think this system of saving survivors is a lot better than just constantly walking back to a safe house every 10 minutes, like you do in previous games. It does mean that most of the survivors become generic NPCs, but I think that was bound to happen anyway, seeing as the games were getting bigger with more to do. The game also has its own cast of psychopaths, with them also being split up into 2 groups, one being attached to the story of the game, whilst the other group are actually representing the 7 deadly sins. The ones you face in the story aren't really anything special in terms of design and backstory, but still offer a lot of different fights and scenarios to keep the game interesting. But the main ones that stick out to me are the 7 deadly sins. These psychos, they're just a bit more unique and interesting to take on. Each of these characters has that classic Dead Rising psycho feel to them. There's Darlene, who represents gluttony, who rides around on a mobility scooter in a local all-you-can-eat buffet, and Dylan, a performer. Yeah, let's call him a performer, who represents lust. Whilst these psychos are still fun to go up against and stick to that mould that previous games had, I just don't think they're as memorable as the ones in the first two games. To sum up, I think the changes to the survivors was a welcome one, and the psychopaths are fun to go up against, but something seems to be missing. I just think that the characters in previous games had a bit more about them, and that just seems to be missing in Dead Rising 3. Before I revisited this game, I didn't really remember much of the map or how the locations looked. I'll be honest, most of it is forgetful, and most of the map is just filled with generic streets that all look the same. The map is separated into 4 different sections connected by highways. The game is set in Los Perdidos, which is obviously inspired by LA, so if you've played something like GTA 5, some of the locations might look a bit similar. You have Ingleton, which is the more low-end part of town, Sunset Hills, which is the more high-end part, South Almuda, an industrial estate, then Central City, the downtown part of the map. After playing the game again, I actually do have a newfound appreciation for the world of Dead Rising 3. It's obviously one of the biggest maps in the series, and still has a ton of interiors to explore and secrets to find, like hidden collectibles and of course the blueprints for the combo weapons. I love the way the roads are mapped out also. You can't just drive around the whole map, you're constantly going to be met with roadblocks and massive hordes of zombies slowing you down. But the game has shortcuts you can take, and it's up to you to find the best way around every situation. It's the first time in the series where the horde actually feel intimidating, so looking for a way around them instead of taking them on is sometimes the best option, and the map of Dead Rising 3 has been set up so that you can always find a way out. When it comes to the overall look and vibe of the world though, Dead Rising 3 doesn't really seem to have the same personality as the previous games. Willamette and Fortune City seemed a lot more bright and colourful and fun to explore. Saying that though, throughout my playthrough I did appreciate the atmosphere more and more as time went on. The game does really feel like the end of the world, with the way the zombies are used, whether that be with the massive hordes or just random zombies falling from rooftops. The more I played of Dead Rising 3, the more it started to become one of my favourite open worlds. So after about 10 years I finally went back to play the Dead Rising game everyone forgets about. So how was he? Well, it's really enjoyable honestly, but I think sadly Dead Rising 3 loses a lot of charm the previous games had, and tries to be a bit more of a generic zombie game, especially with its setting and most of its bosses. Saying all that though, I can't help but be impressed that this game is almost 12 years old and still holds up to this day. A massive map with tons of areas to explore with no loading screens and hundreds of zombies down every street. Dead Rising 3 has a lot to offer in terms of good old fashioned zombie survival, but sadly a lot of the charm from the last two games is just missing. So yeah, that is it for Dead Rising 3, and of course I've got to put it in the tier list, and I'm going to put it in A tier. It's a really good game. I was pleasantly surprised. My thoughts on it before I played it for this video were a bit negative. I remember it being quite boring and depressing and looking just bland, but after playing it and exploring the map even more, it's actually surprisingly good. It holds up really well as well. It's a 12-year-old game and it still plays really well. Like I said, the map is actually really, is it dense? Is that the word I'm looking for? I think so, but there's a lot to explore. There's places I haven't even seen that when the first time I played it that you can go in. Like there's a shipwrecked boat, there's the subway sort of train station thing you can find. There was a lot to see and do. I think it was just missing certain things, like if in Dead Rising 2 you had a lot of mini games you could play around the city of Fortune City, but you could do a lot of different stuff in this. It's just same old gameplay loop. There's no mini games to play unless I didn't actually find any, but yeah, it was just missing that character that the original Dead Rising games had, with the psychopaths and the sort of the way the world's treated, if that makes sense. It felt a little more generic, but saying that, it was still really good in terms of how well made the map was and thought out. It was just a really good, well put together game, and it's a shame that no one really talks about it, because I think it does deserve a bit more praise, because it is actually a really good game. If you've never played Dead Rising 3, if you have a PlayStation you can't play it, but if you have a PC or if you have Xbox you can still play it, and it's super fun, and it goes on sale now and again for less than £10, so go and check it out. Honestly, it's one of the best games in the series, and it's very underrated. So yeah, I did enjoy my time playing Dead Rising 3, so yeah, 2 thumbs up from me. There we go. But yeah, definitely deserve to be A in the tier list. So yeah, that is it for today's video. Next up will be Dead Rising 4, which is, you know, it's not the best, but I'm gonna get through that. It'll be out in the next 2 weeks. Obviously before that I'll have a video in between the retrospectives, which I've been doing for the last 6 weeks, I think, consistently uploading, so that's good. Keeping it up. I'm trying to keep on my schedule, which is, I've done really well so far. I'm going to try and keep it up. So if you are new to the channel, please subscribe. I will have a new video out every single week. Sometimes it'll be the retrospective, sometimes it'll be something different, but yeah, please support the channel, please subscribe, please. If you've just stumbled across this video, please go and watch the other Dead Rising videos. They're not doing as well as the Saints Row or Tekken series, and like I said before, I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea. Zombie games aren't the most popular, a lot of people are bored by them, but the Dead Rising series is a really good series, so please go and support this series in particular. But yeah, a lot of fun things coming up on the channel, so please subscribe. It's the best way to keep up to date. I do post a lot in the community tab. I've got a poll on there now if I should speak about DLC on these videos or just keep it to the base game when I'm talking about retrospectives. But let me know. Subscribe, please like the video if you have enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. What did you think of Dead Rising 3? And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you when I see you.